When I go into companies, often I get asked to train the people leaders. And I like to use the word leader more broadly, which is, I think even if you're an individual contributor, you're expected to lead. You're expected to show thought leadership. You're expected to show people leadership, even cross-functionally. So I think that the skills needed to become omnimodal leaders is actually at all levels of the company, and especially important because I don't think that the weight of this should be completely on the people manager's shoulders. It's actually a two-way street, that even the individual contributors need to know how to work remotely, how to work in hybrid environments with their manager.
Welcome to Unexpected Journey, the show where each week top professionals share work wisdom and life lessons about their careers and what they have learned about human experience in the workplace. I'm your host, Ann Bibb. This week we have Sacha Connor, the CEO of Virtual Work Insider, a consultancy that provides thought leadership and training on how to lead, communicate, collaborate, and build culture on hybrid and remote teams. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and leave your comments below. Now let's get started. Welcome back to Unexpected Journey. Welcome, Sacha.
Hi, Ann. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. We've known each other for a long time. We have these little conversations on the regular, but this time we're going to record it.
Great.
No pressure.
I can't
wait.
No
pressure. It's like, what are we going to say that actually the whole world is going to hear today?
That's through, the video conferencing and not on a beach in Bali.
Right. So for everybody that does not know us, because a lot of people do, Sacha and I actually met at Running Remote, which is a great conference that has been around for many years. But we met in Bali at this conference many, many years ago. I think it was in 2018 or 2019. And we've been friends ever since. And I am so grateful for that. When I met you, it was at the very beginning of your journey of starting Virtual Work Insider.
Right. This unexpected journey that we're going to talk about today, right?
The unexpected journey, right? Because you were just kind of starting this. And I remember having this conversation. We were sitting not on the beach, but not far from the beach. And I remember the ocean in the background. And I remember you telling me about how you were just starting this and you were kind of nervous about it and you weren't really sure, but you had this plan and you had this idea. So what led you here? Why did you start this?
So why I started Virtual Work Insider? Well, I just celebrated my 12-year remote anniversary.
Remote anniversary.
I coined that phrase a couple of years ago when I hit a decade of remote work. So now we're at 12 years. So that's 12 years of working remotely while leading hybrid and remote teams. And my remote work story started back in 2010. So that was when I was working for the Clorox Company, which is a $7 billion company that's headquartered in Oakland, California. It makes a bunch of the products that you probably have in your household already.
Just a little company, just a tiny company, Sacha.
But so much more than cleaning products. Everybody thinks about it as bleach and cleaning products, but I worked on Brita water filters, Kingsford charcoal, Hidden Valley Ranch dressing, right? A lot of people don't know. Yes.
No way. You're kidding.
Yes. Nope. Clorox owns food brands. So I had worked there for 14 years in total. So I started working at the Oakland headquarters and I was there for 6 years when my husband and I had our first of our two kids, my daughter, Nevin. And my family and my husband's family lived and still live in the Philadelphia area. And we wanted her to grow up near her grandparents. So that prompted me to ask a bold question of Clorox, which was, could I keep my job, but do it from the opposite coast of the United States? So back in 2010, it was unheard of at the time to have a job like I did, which was leading large new product innovation teams and marketing teams and sales teams, and not do it from headquarters. But I had a good relationship with the chief marketing officer. And he said, okay, you could be an experiment. Let's see if you can do your job from 3,000 miles and 3 time zones away.
This is the word that we all want to hear as executives. You can be an experiment.
I took it in a positive light, right? But also, I mean, it came with a lot of pressure. I felt like, I had to figure this out, because if I didn't figure this out, then no one else was going to be allowed to do this. And, that experiment turned into 8 years of me leading large hybrid teams from my office here in the Philadelphia suburbs. So I realized that hybrid work and remote work is really hard. And I was having to learn through trial and error. And, some days I felt like I had a hand tied behind my back. Other days I felt like I was blindfolded trying to do the work that I was doing. But it led me to realize that I was learning so much through that trial and error process, that I was uniquely positioned to actually help others, to help other teams, companies, industries, by creating training that use my successes and my screw ups, and also the latest best practices in hybrid and remote work, to help others get up that learning curve faster. So that's what eventually led to me founding Virtual Work Insider. Now it's been over 4 years.
One of the things that you've told me over the years, and that I found very interesting, was that when you were at Clorox, and you went remote, you started an ERG to help people because you were the first, but then it was a successful experiment and others started doing it. So how did this ERG come about? And then how did you go about, did you present that ERG opportunity as something that you wanted to do, or did they come to you and say, this is a needed thing? And then how did you grow that?
Yeah, I love telling the story about the employee resource group. And so actually it started out as a small pocket of people that found each other that were working fully remotely. So as I was mentioning before, when I went remote back in 2010, I didn't know how to do this. I went from overnight working in the headquarters office with the people that I was working with mostly on a daily basis, to now, like I said, 3,000 miles and 3 time zones away. And 2010, we didn't have a lot of the technology tools that we have now as well. So I was having every day to kind of reinvent how to do my job. And so I found this pocket of people and other functions across the company that were also working fully remotely. And so when I say small pocket, I mean, it was less than 5% of, roughly 8,000 employees. And we started just informally to get together and share best practices. How are you being involved in this type of meeting? How are you handling getting this type of work done? And then in 2013, we had this idea to take that concept of a traditional employee resource group and apply it to the virtual workforce. So for those who don't know what an ERG is, oftentimes large corporations and enterprises especially have these groups that are volunteer-led teams that are responsible for supporting colleagues and driving business goals. And they're usually formed around common interests, backgrounds, or demographics. So for example, there's women ERGs, Black ERGs, Asian Pacific ERGs, next gen, parents ERGs, that kind of thing. And so we took that concept and applied it to the virtual workforce and created the first ever virtual workforce employee resource group. Not first ever at Clorox, first ever. And at first, we thought we were creating this group for that small pocket, that 5% of fully remote employees. But then what happened was we started to see more and more signups to be part of the ERG. We were becoming the fastest and largest growing employee ERG. And I started asking people who worked out of headquarters why they were signing up for the ERG, because they weren't working remotely. And I learned that they said, well, we're working with people in other office sites and some of the remote employees. We need to learn how to work in these virtual teams.
So they wanted to learn how to work with them, even though they weren't in them.
Yes. And that for me was like this huge light bulb moment, which was what we were teaching and talking about with each other was important to 95% of the workforce, because we were all working across distance in some way. Even from headquarters in Oakland, California, to our large campus in Pleasanton, which is a 30-minute drive, that was a virtual relationship. And those teams, they were innovation teams that were across those two different building sites that needed to even know how to work with each other and work with the sales offices that were in other parts of the US and the globe. So that was a huge light bulb moment.
I guess my big question here is, how do you start an ERG?
So most ERGs are under the diversity, equity, inclusion umbrella within a company. So the chief diversity officer may be overseeing the ERGs within your company. So we went to that director of diversity and inclusion in our
case. A lot
case.
of our listeners, though, are, to give you an idea, we have 50% men, 50% women. We have an age range of 25 to 55, and it's pretty equal across, which to me indicates that we have people that are all the way from manager all the way up to C-suite. And we have, which I found very fascinating, startups to enterprise. So they might not have a chief diversity officer. They may be in that, middle to end stage startup and realizing that this is something that they need, but they don't quite have a CPO or a chief diversity officer or a CHRO, but they know that this is something that as an organization that they need. If that's what they need and they don't have that resource, what would your recommendation be?
So my recommendation there is to go to whoever the decision makers are in the company to talk about, what the need is that they've identified and present a recommendation on how they would create this ERG to help fill that need. There's a case study about this ERG I created. It was we called it Orbit, and so we can do a link to that case study. And then also, Virtual Work Insider offers some services to actually help create these ERGs. So if somebody wants to reach out to us as well about that, we can help as well.
I loved the Orbit.
So Orbit was Office's remote but integral teammates, which was our original name for the ERG. And we had named it that because what we were feeling a lot was what we didn't have a word for at the time, which was distance bias, our brain's natural tendency to put more importance on the people and things that are closer to us than those that are further away. This is part of the Neuro Leadership Institute's unconscious bias model, and we were feeling that, and so that kind of came out in that acronym, the Orbit acronym.
It really does, and that's one of the reasons I loved it so much. And you're right, it does encapsulate distance bias. And that's one of the reasons I loved Orbit so much. Just the word orbit, to me, I felt the integral teams, even though I couldn't remember the word, because we're all in the same orbit.
Yes, exactly. So we love that, the fact that we were all in different places, but we were all really integral. And over time, as I was mentioning before, because we were having so many people sign up that actually weren't working remotely, they were working in distributed offices, we dropped kind of the acronym and just went with the Orbit name, because then it was encompassing everybody who was signing up for this. And our mission became broader, which was to enable Clorox employees and teams to thrive wherever they lived or worked.
I just thought that was the coolest story, and I love talking about it, and I wanted to make sure everybody had an opportunity. And I do want to talk specifically about different kinds of training and hybrid type of training and leadership. Hybrid right now is being defined, well, it's almost undefined because it's being defined by different organizations differently. It can be defined as, coming into the office a couple days a week. It can be defined as, I'm a hybrid organization because I've got half the team in-house and half the team that works from home. So I'm a hybrid organization, not the people coming in and out, but I've got some here and there.
Right.
So, it's interesting. And there are multiple different ways that people are defining it. I'm having a hybrid meeting because I've got some people that are here and I've got some people that are there. I'm having a hybrid training because I've got some people here and some people that are not. I'm having a hybrid training because some people I'm doing some of it here, but some of it's going away. It's interesting how hybrid is being defined so differently by so many different people. And it almost feels like you have to put the second word with hybrid in order to understand what they mean by hybrid.
I think what you're bringing up is that hybrid has become this buzzword of, probably it started with 2021, right? And if we go back to kind of where I started with Virtual Work Insider, I started the business to help companies work across distance, whatever distance meant for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that could mean, as some of the things that you just talked about, that could mean a group of people that is in the location majority in a conference room together with people who are in other office sites in conference rooms together. It could mean a group of people that's together with other people who are fully remote in multiple different locations, time zones, etc. And like you said, that could mean a hybrid work strategy, or it could mean a hybrid meeting. But I think the real thing to think about when it comes to hybrid is, there are so many different workforce strategy choices that companies are making, and each company is deciding on their workforce strategy based on their company values, based on the type of work they do, based on their employees' needs and wants. And they are super complex decisions. So I've been working with really large organizations that have made a wide variety of these decisions, from what we would call hybrid flex, meaning, some general guidelines for when people need to be in office. So for example, some people might be on some sort of weekly schedule, come in a couple of days a week, whatever days you choose, or you're expected to come in monthly, again, on the days that you choose with your team, or quarterly. Or hybrid structured, where there are some organizations that are defining those in-office days. They've found it to be a simpler way by defining that, for example, employees must come into their local office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday each week. And in those cases, they're making those decisions because it's simplifying, that others know that that other people on their team or their function or their company will be there, and that they wouldn't be commuting just to be in an office by themselves on a video conference all day long.
Very well said. And one of the other things I'm hearing from you is something that we as remote work advocates have said for many years, is that remote work is not one size fits all. I am also hearing hybrid is not one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is an incredible time of experimentation right now. So even if a company has set a workforce strategy of what I was talking about, hybrid structure, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday each week, or if they've set one that's hybrid flexible, where it's telling, some groups that they need to come in on a weekly basis, monthly, quarterly, we don't know what the right answer is yet. We are experimenting. We are going to see how that works in terms of hitting business objectives, and also making sure that people are engaged and feeling great about the work that they do and the flexibility that they have. And it should be iterative. Learn, hear from your employees, see how the business results are coming in, and adjust. And I know we're going to talk in a little bit about upskilling for this environment, but that's an important piece of this as well, because we can't just assume we're going to create this experiment about hybrid work and that everybody's going to know how to do it and it's going to be perfect.
And I think that that's a really good point, though, is that you have to be flexible, right? I mean, don't put your feet in the sand and say, this is where, bring the cement on. This is where we're staying, because as things change, I mean, look at everything that's happened over the last 5 years. You're nowhere near where you were 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 6 months ago.
Right.
How often as businesses we have to change? Even as you grow as an organization, you have to change. You need to be flexible and adjust in order to continue to grow and move as an organization. So I think that's a really important message you just gave. And a nice segue that you just gave also, to talk about the important differences in how we train for remote, hybrid, on-site. How is it different to train for a hybrid workforce?
Yeah, and I think I would even ladder that up to, that there's this constant of teams working across distance, as we've talked about before, right? That could mean hybrid. That could mean we're also hearing terms like remote first workforces, work from anywhere workforces, geographically distributed teams, right? All of these terms. And in my opinion, the constant there is working across some sort of distance. And we need to create the skills and the mindsets and the behaviors to enable those teams that are working across distance. And I think that there's two important components to this. One is needing to be aware of the unconscious biases that happen in those work environments. So distance bias and recency bias. So I've mentioned already distance bias, right? Our brain's natural tendency to put more value on the people and things that are closer to us than those that are farther away. And its close cousin, which is recency bias, which is our brain's natural tendency to put more value in the people and things that we've heard from or seen most recently. And those biases are rearing their ugly head again as hybrid work environments are happening and offices were reopening, and you've got a group of people that are co-located together in the location majority with others in the location minority. So first, just being aware of those unconscious biases. And the second piece is that people leaders and individual contributors, they have not yet been taught the skills to be what I call omnimodal leaders. And what I mean by omnimodal is being equally successful with communicating, collaborating, influencing, building culture and relationships in all of these different modes. So a fully in-person mode is different than a hybrid mode where you might be in a building or a conference room with some people, with others that you're having to interact in other places, which is different than a mode of being with a fully remote group. And what's happening now is that people are having to switch between these modes even within a given day. So for example, you might have someone who is at home in the morning and they are running a fully remote global meeting. And then they commute into the office and they have a small in-person meeting in the office and then some other in-person touch points. And then they jump into a conference room where they are facilitating a meeting with some people in the room with them and others that are remote. And then they commute back home and they are then logging into a meeting where they are remote and other people are together in an office setting or a meeting room.
That sounds exhausting.
This is a huge ask for people to learn how to do this. I've been doing this for 12 years and I am still learning every day on how to be better at this. And I think we need to pause and realize we haven't prepared our people yet to be able to switch across these modes.
Not only is that exhausting from a brain capacity and switching across modes, the time and energy that we're asking people to give is exhausting. It's just exhausting. Like, it just is. But also the leadership that is needed from those types of individuals. Yes, the omnimodal, which I love that word, and I'm totally using that moving
Go for
forward.
it.
The omnimodal need to be able to do that, but that is a different type of leadership need for somebody to be able to do that and lead a team in that capacity. That's next level. And I think that we saw and I've had this conversation with many different people over the pandemic, we saw that gap get magnified. And when I say magnified, it was highlighted the miss that was happening there because remote work has been around for decades. I started remote working in the 90s, in the 1900s. But and I was leading. But what I find interesting is that and people saying that remote work is what caused so many issues. But it was during the pandemic when so many people moved remote that they weren't trained on how to do what you just said of leading across distance. If you don't know how to do it, if you don't know the signs to look for, if you don't know what to listen for, that's going to be stressful, not just on you, but on your team. And then to go back into the office and into a hybrid environment, the shift that is needed, there's a huge gap across leadership training that is needed across corporate right now. And I'm interested to hear where you feel the gaps are across this. And this is not just in any industry. It's not just in any size. It's just leadership that needs help on how to lead and not manage, lead people in both remote and hybrid.
Yeah, and that word lead, I want to talk about that for a second, because when I go into companies, often I get asked to train the people leaders. And I like to use the word leader more broadly, which is, I think even if you're an individual contributor, you're expected to lead. You're expected to show thought leadership. You're expected to show people leadership, even cross-functionally. So I think that the skills needed to become omnimodal leaders is actually at all levels of the company, and especially important because I don't think that the weight of this should be completely on the people manager's shoulders. It's actually a two-way street, that even the individual contributors need to know how to work remotely, how to work in hybrid environments with their manager remotely in a hybrid environment, and vice versa. So I think that this is applicable to all levels of the organization. And it's even applicable at the very senior levels of the organization, where I think that there are some people who actually think that they know how to do this already, but could also maybe have a refresher, or it's good for them to go through the training at the same time so that everybody is learning the same skills, mindsets, and behaviors, the same terminology, and kind of going through this change management together. So that's just a little bit on kind of leadership there. And then what you were talking about, the difference between, the pandemic remote work and then transitioning into hybrid work. The pandemic, what happened was, what I knew was going to happen was that people were going to fall back on the two things that they knew how to do, which was schedule meetings and send emails.
The meetings, Sasha, the meetings.
Yes.
Like just what, back to back, 8 hours of meetings. In those meetings, you're talking about meetings, you're getting assigned tasks that you can't get to until the end of the day because you spent all day in meetings.
Right.
The madness.
And that's carrying over now into these hybrid work environments. So I'll give you an example of what was happening in these back-to-back meetings, and then nobody ever kind of unraveled that. And then as some people were having to commute back into an office, others were creating meeting invites that were happening during the commute times of other people. And so their team members were not showing up to meetings, or calling in, in the car and distracted. And because there weren't intentional conversations around, okay, what are our new hybrid work schedules? What is our working agreement? And so we are working a lot with teams right now to create these hybrid team or remote team working agreements, to walk these teams through the steps to intentionally codify their team norms. And that includes things like availability expectations. So whether some people are commuting on any given day, so they can't now call into a Zoom meeting between 7 and 9 a.m., for example. And it also means having conversations around the team's anatomy, their geographic anatomy. We often will map out visually where the team is, so that it actually is in black and white to say, oh, we have people that are in 4 different time zones or 6 different time zones. And so when you schedule a meeting that is at 1 p.m. Eastern, what does that mean for Europe? Or even within the US, we see a lot of unintentionally, back to headquarters centric. If you have a headquarters on Pacific time, that a lot of those meetings then require East Coast people or Central time zone people to work really late. And that group might not feel comfortable speaking up for themselves to have a more location inclusive time zone choice for a meeting. So one of the things that we do too with teams is actually create a chart of where everybody, what time zone people are in, what location they're in, help get people to know each other a little bit better too. And then start to talk to them about the difference between synchronous and asynchronous communication.
Oh gosh, here we go. How does that go? The asynchronous conversation.
Well, it's new, especially for a lot of more legacy, longer tenured companies haven't even thought about communication in those terms, right? Most enterprises are highly synchronous enterprises. So if I think back to Clorox, that's the experience that I had.
Do they realize though that they've been communicating asynchronously for years through email?
No, because that's not the word. That's not the word, right? That's not the term. This is a fairly new term that we're using to describe that, right? But they definitely lean more heavily to synchronous communication for collaboration, decision making, brainstorming. All of those things needed to be done live. They weren't things that were being done asynchronously. And again, back to my experience at Clorox, I was in back-to-back meetings all day long, every day. So I get it. But what we do with teams is try to unravel that a little bit and talk about what should be done asynchronously versus what should be done synchronously. And a lot of that is getting to change the behavior of having meetings for updates and share outs, right? So a lot of meetings are just meant to share out information and provide an update or an FYI, versus being very action oriented to having things done asynchronously as pre-work so that the live synchronous time can be used for debate, decision making, understanding something that's more nuanced. And that is a new behavior that we're starting to teach. And to that point, I think the idea of these stand-ups, virtual stand-ups, these huddles, that's a new concept to a lot of teams. And then to even the synchronous huddles, and then to move that to asynchronous is a very different behavior. But it can become very powerful, as you said, because it's a way to keep everybody accountable for what they're working on. I used to have synchronous stand-ups on Monday mornings with my team. And as a team leader, it was super helpful to do that because I could make sure that in my hybrid team, because I wasn't there every day, kind of being able to run into people in the office, that we were all aligned on our priorities for the week. Because the worst thing is that people are off working on something that they shouldn't be, that isn't a priority for that week. So finding a way to create a ritual, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, to make sure that everybody is on the same page with the priorities for that week, that month, that quarter even, is really important. And once we can give you a toolbox of things like a synchronous stand-up and asynchronous stand-up, office hours, and other rituals that can replace some of these 1 hour long meetings, then it frees up your time to do focused work. It allows you to not always have to work nights and weekends to catch up on the things that you mentioned around, like, I'm taking meeting notes about all the action items that need to happen, but when am I ever going to get this done if it's not at night or on the weekends?
Absolutely. So, Sacha, how would or why would somebody get in touch with you? And then how would they get in touch with you?
So if you are interested in any upskilling skills workshops in hybrid and remote work, and that could be at a team level, that could be at an enterprise level, or even just a keynote or some sort of panel discussion. So we do a lot of speaking engagements as well. And we work from the team level all the way up to the C-suite. Then you can reach out to me. Our website is virtualworkinsider.com. And I know that we'll put some links with the podcast as well. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. So my name is Sacha, S-A-C-H-A, Connor, C-O-N-N-O-R. You can find me on LinkedIn there. Follow me there, DM me there if you'd like. I put out content weekly on hybrid and remote work as well. And on the website as well, you can see what our top 5 skills workshops are. And they range everything from what we talked about setting those expectations and norms with the team, to how do you influence across distance. So that's something we didn't get into deeply today, but that is a hugely important skill, and one of the hardest skills to master is how do you influence your key stakeholders when you can't be in person with them on a daily basis, and how do you build culture in teams, and how do you work with direct reports and a manager who's not co-located with you. So we have workshops that range across those different skills.
Wonderful. And as Sacha said, those links will be below, and we are so grateful, Sacha, for you joining us this week. Thank you. Look forward to you being on the show again, and we look forward to seeing everybody again next week.
Bye.
As we wrap the episode up, we would like to take this time to thank you for joining us this week on Unexpected Journey. Our guest information will be linked in the episode description, along with a link to our company website, remoteevolution.com, and our host website, Bibb.com. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on your favorite podcast app and on our YouTube channel so that you never miss an episode and we can continue to bring them to you. Let us know your thoughts on what we discussed in the comment section. And once again, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again next week for another episode of Unexpected Journey.